happening.
The bus driver is unaware that this situation is taking place. Can you just confirm that it's a Greyhound bus? It is a Greyhound bus, number 7268, Greyhound bus. Copy, we're trying to get a hold of Greyhound, thank you. He made statements when he showed the gun that he was going to kill everybody on the bus when they got to Chicago.
The police chased down the bus and arrested 33-year-old Margarito Vargas Rojas. Now, he said he had a weapon, but police say they did not find one when they searched him. Now, the suspect is reportedly an undocumented immigrant and had previously been deported. Passengers say the threats were made after an argument between two passengers on the bus.
So the question today, could North Korea be going to the Winter Olympics? The North and South are holding talks tomorrow as to whether to allow the North to send a delegation to next month's Winter Games there in South Korea. Live from Washington, Christine Brennan, CNN sports analyst and sports columnist for USA Today. Christine, good to see you. So let's talk about the logistics for this. First of all, if it happens, South Korea, Seoul is in a tough place because they have to honor sanctions that are imposed on North Korea, and yet they have to host this delegation. How are they going to monitor or accommodate that if it happens?
Well, it's an unknown at this point because there's so many things, Christy, that still need to be worked out. But the goal here is to get North Korean athletes, there's a figure skating pair that actually qualified, and to get them to compete. The idea being, of course, if North Korean athletes are actually at the games, then the theory is anyway, they would be safer because you would not have a leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, leader of the United States, obviously Donald Trump, or anyone else wanting to cause trouble when you actually have your own athletes on site, on the ground there. So that's it. Already there's a cheering squad that is supposed to be coming. That, of course, is not an Olympic event. I don't know if they'll just cheer at the opening or closing ceremonies, whatever. But any North Korean athletes who can get to South Korea and be part of a delegation at the Olympic Games, that is considered a good thing by the IOC and pretty much by everyone around the world.
I read in addition to that cheerleading squad, the athletes and the officials, perhaps there are going to be minders there to watch for defections. Possible?
Well, we've seen that certainly, and we've seen that before the Pan American Games in 1987 in Indianapolis. Havana, of course, Fidel Castro, very concerned about that, and rightly so, because some Cuban athletes did want to defect, and a few did defect to the United States in 1987. There were big posters saying you can, and billboards that you could, come here, safe house, that kind of thing. So that has certainly happened. My goodness, Bela Karolyi, Nadia Comaneci's coach, Mary Lou Retton's coach, one of the great coaches, he and his wife, Marta, of course, also a great coach, they defected. To the United States. So there's many, sports often is that avenue and is that doorway to defection.
Talk to me about the challenge for Vice President Pence in terms of the diplomacy issue if North Korea is there. And just in general with everything that's happened in the last 48 hours and his dealing with other leaders.
Absolutely. Well, and also dealing with his own athletes. Lindsey Vonn, the skier, Adam Rippon just made the Olympic team in figure skating. Both have said they don't want to go to the White House to celebrate if they are invited after the fact. But the role of Mike Pence and the delegation, Christy, when they go to the Olympics, is more of one of greeting and meeting the U.S. team, spending time with them, and being head cheerleader, so to speak. So my sense would be that Mike Pence could run into some frosty relations, whatever, with some of the U.S. athletes. In terms of going there and being part of the delegation, yes, I think certainly anything that's happened over the last couple of days and Donald Trump's comments are not helpful in terms of having a gathering of the world and having a peaceful gathering of the world. But I do think that when the U.S. delegation comes, they are often just part of the U.S. athletes and they stay in that area, go and cheer them on and then leave. And I'm guessing we'll see the same thing in this case.
All righty. Christine Brennan, I always learn from you. Thank you so much for being here.
Christy, thank you. Take care.
You too.
H&M has shut down more than a dozen stores in South Africa. There were some really violent protests. We have video of one store here. People here were angry. They ransacked the store, knocked over the racks, the clothing, security sensors ripped.
Yeah, they're protesting an ad that some are calling racist. Take a look at it here, showing this young boy wearing a hoodie that says "coolest monkey in the jungle." H&M is apologizing for the jacket, saying it was a poorly judged product. The company has not said when the stores will reopen at this point. So, heading to the airport, ready to take a flight. Look away now. This incredible video just came into us in the last hour. See that plane there? Right there. Just a few feet away from the Black Sea, I believe, as it skidded off the runway in Turkey. Ended up halfway down a steep slope. And none of the 162 passengers, 2 pilots, or 4 cabin crew were hurt, thankfully. The airline says the plane had a, quote, runway excursion incident.
That's cute.
Whatever that means. I'm just looking at that thinking, how did they get everybody out of that plane without it? Because it looks as though it could just slide right into the ocean.
You know, I hadn't even thought about that. My question is, why is the runway right at the edge of a cliff? Did no one think of that when they designed this thing?
I can't answer that question, Victor, but that's a good one, too.
Sorry, that was my Seinfeld emotion coming out. What's the deal with runways on a cliff? All right.
What's up with?
Okay, so this hasn't happened since Andrew Jackson was president, but now Democrats say they want to censure President Trump. Will it work? Will Republicans allow it to happen? We'll ask former Democratic aide Brent Podolsky and former Republican Congressman Jack Kingston.
And self-driving cars could make you a permanent backseat driver. We're going to explain why you may not need a car in the future, actually. Boom.
All right, 32 minutes after the hour now. This weekend, the president is going after Democrats on Twitter. He tweeted last night, "I don't believe the Democrats really want to see a deal on DACA. They are all talk and no action. This is the time, but day by day, they are blowing the one great opportunity they have. Too bad." Is this the negotiation strategy here? Joining me now, Brent Podolsky, opinion columnist at The Hill and former Democratic aide, and Jack Kingston, CNN political commentator and former Republican congressman. Gentlemen, good morning to you.
Good morning, Vic.
Morning.
All right, so Jack, let me start here with you. You heard the tweet there from the president. I'm sure you saw it before I read it. Help me understand the position of negotiation here. The president has said that he and top Republicans want DACA. They want the protections for the DACA recipients, and Democrats too. But he's saying, as in relation to the wall, I want to do this DACA thing, you want to do this DACA thing, but I'll only do it if you do something you don't want to do, which is pay for the wall. Is that where Republicans are starting?
I think somewhat, and that's the way all negotiations are in Washington. One party does something that they don't really want to do, but they do it in exchange. That, for example, is how we pass every minimum wage bill.
But then what's the thing that Republicans don't want to do as part of this? What's the pill they have to take?
Well, the amnesty part. Republicans, I'd say probably 99% of Republicans have run against amnesty, and this is perceived as a form of amnesty, and people aren't very fired up about it. The other thing is issues related to immigration, such as ending chain migration or birthright citizenship or requiring E-Verify, those are all good bargaining tools, which I think the Democrats, in terms of good faith negotiation, should consider some of those things.
So we haven't heard DACA referred to as amnesty by the leadership here, who all supports it, and the president in some time. Now, he was against it during the campaign and then kind of shifted as he became president. So, Brent, let me come to you. Are Democrats blowing the great opportunity they have, as the president says?
Well, first of all, when the president tweets that Democrats do not want a DACA deal, the president is lying through his teeth, and he knows it. And he would be well advised, if he's watching this show, that he doesn't help himself with this kind of thing. I personally believe there will be a DACA agreement. I believe it will include, in the end, funding for border security, not for the wall. That will be decided, I predict, later on. I'm not a big fan of the wall. Russia built a wall in Berlin, and it didn't work out that well for them. Walls don't work out, and it is the private view of many prominent Republicans. They just don't want to say it for understandable reasons. But what's really happening, as we sit here today, this morning, now, Sunday.
It's so dark, you might think it's night.
We're up bright and early.
As we sit here right now, there are dreamers watching this show, and they are genuinely afraid and worried that this president, by his callousness, will send them, deport them back to their countries. They've only known America. They are what the Statue of Liberty is all about. They are the American dream. They are the heart of what this country stands for. And for the president to put them through this He had a famous dinner and meeting with Chuck and Nancy.
Yeah, and which they said there was a deal that was
all the president
made.
needs to do is to keep his word of honor that he gave at that meeting.
All right, so we'll see if there is a deal that comes through. Brent, I hate to cut you off here, but I want to move to something else. That this is this censure motion that's coming. Two Democratic congressmen say they'll introduce this motion to censure the president for his comments about African countries and also El Salvador and Haiti. Jack, to you, appropriate for Congress to formally say, to reprimand the president here?
I think when censorship has been used in the past, for example, James Polk over the Mexican War or John Tyler over some financial stuff, there have been more serious matters at stake than just something offensive that the president said in a private meeting in which he may or may not have wanted repeated, but it wasn't a statement of position. I was there when Charlie Rangel was censored, and it had to do with some ethics issues. I was also there when I think the fledgling group MoveOn.org came up with a slogan called Censor and Move On, wanting us to censor Bill Clinton rather than impeach him. And I think it's a long, long shot for the minority to be able to get it through the majority.
Yeah, it likely won't get through, but do you think it's appropriate? Quickly, because I got another question for Brent.
Well, censorship means, you disapprove of somebody's actions or statements. So I think that it is appropriate for somebody who is so offended to try to make that move, but I don't think the case is there for it.
Brent, let me go to something from Congressman from Texas, Al Green. He plans to introduce a resolution again to impeach the president. He just did this last month. He's going to do it again. Got 58 Democratic votes in support last time. I mean, holding an impeachment vote month after month, I mean, does this eventually just become white noise?
No, I'm not advocating an impeachment vote right now, and Democratic leaders and most Democrats in the House are not. What I'm advocating is a censure vote of the president for what he did in recent days, a word I will not use on television, and what he has done repeatedly, playing what I called in the Hill column on Friday, I called it the politics of racism. I won't take the time to give the examples. Here's the bottom line of what they should censure. America, Victor, is a country of blacks, whites, Asians, Hispanics, Native Americans. America is a family. America is a community of people who come together like a family comes together. Yeah. America is a country of different religions and different faiths. President Trump, to his timeless and historic discredit, has not honored that tradition. He has violated it and attacked it, and frankly, that makes me madder than hell, and a lot of Americans madder than hell. The way to stand up for the values of our country is to censure the behavior that violates it.
Well, we will see how far this censure motion goes. Again, two Democratic congressmen say they plan to introduce it very soon. Brent Badowski, Jack Kingston, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, up next, a car that takes you out of the driver's seat and does so for good. The latest technology that will change how you get from point A to point B.
The U.S. Pacific Command has detected a missile threat to Hawaii. A missile may impact on land or sea within minutes.
Students at the University of Hawaii running in panic.
Put the baby in the bathroom, didn't know what else to do in the stroller in case we had to run.
What happened today is totally unacceptable.
Someone pushed the wrong button and let everybody in Hawaii think that there was this incoming ballistic missile. It took the government 38 minutes to be able to issue a correction.
Mr. President, do you believe you're a racist? And he did not answer. His silence was deafening.
Any comment from this president, no matter how racially inflammatory, is quote-unquote not racist. For the Paul Ryan wing of this party, they have traded in the dignity of this country for their tax cuts.
It was a bad remark, and I would hope the president would retract it and move on from it.
This is New Day Weekend with Victor Blackwell and Christy Pope.
And this morning, Hawaiian officials say they're determined to make sure that the false alarm that sent the entire state into panic never happens again.
Yeah, for 38 minutes yesterday, people feared that there was a missile flying through the air and about to hit Hawaii. And it's because of this alert. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Now, this is a warning that was sent to people's phones. They showed up on their TVs. They played on the radio stations across the state.
State officials say all of this panic was caused by someone hitting the wrong button. And a federal investigation is now going to begin to figure out how one incident could cause this many problems.
So CNN's Sarah Seidner is in Hawaii. She's got some more details for us this morning.
Victor and Christy, you know, that emergency alert that said that there was an incoming ballistic missile to Hawaii to seek shelter and that it was not a drill did send out a sense of panic to folks here. People trying to figure out where exactly to go, what exactly to do, knowing that emergency managers have been telling people here in Hawaii that there is only a 20-minute span between the time a missile would be launched from North Korea to the time it would make it here and make impact here in Hawaii. It's a very short time for people to figure out what to do and to take shelter. We also were able to speak with one of the state representatives here who was in tears, talking about the fact that he had to explain this to his children and take shelter in his house while he was also trying to get information out to his constituents. And what a difficult thing it was to have a conversation thinking that this could be their last conversation. And we're seeing that across social media as well. People talking about their last conversations they thought they were having with their family members after they got this message. All in all, though, we have heard from emergency management officials and the governor himself. I spoke to them on the phone. They told me that this was human error. They apologized for it. They said it will not happen again. They are looking at exactly how it happened, but they said what eventually happened and what they determined is that someone accidentally pressed the wrong button during a shift change. They were testing the system, and they have been testing the system here in Hawaii, but never anything like this. The test is an actual emergency siren, an attack siren that goes off, and they have told the population here what it's all about. But indeed, in this time, it wasn't the attack system that went off. It was a message to television viewers. It was a message through the radio and a text message on the cell phone. As emergency managers try and figure out how to make sure this never happens again, they are apologizing, saying this is human error, but it did create quite a bit of emotion here in Hawaii. Victor, Christy.
Sarah, thank you so much. CNN producer Amanda Golden is with us now. She was in Hawaii yesterday when this happened. Amanda, glad you're okay, but help us understand what it was like there when this alert first went out.
Yeah, hi, good morning, guys. Thank you for having me. It was incredibly alarming. I've never experienced anything like it. As you guys mentioned, the alerts went off on everyone's phones. It started coming over the television. And we didn't really know what to think of it at first. I didn't think it was a legitimate threat immediately until my sister started screaming and was running through where we were staying. I was vacationing with my family. And immediately I called into CNN, and I was monitoring Twitter as actively as I could, trying to understand what was happening, and tweeted out a screenshot of the alert because, as you guys said at the beginning, the text of the alert was so alarming, saying that this is not a drill, to seek immediate shelter. And so just trying to figure out what next steps would be when you don't really know what next steps would be.
So where did you go? Where did the people you were with go?
We stayed where we were. We realized very quickly that there wasn't any basement or any other option of a room without a lot of windows. It's, you know, right near the water, so obviously everything is a little more beach designed. And we were tossing around ideas. Do we get in the car? Do we go anywhere? We really weren't sure. So we just all got together and tried to understand what was happening the best that we could.
Did anybody where you were staying or anybody near where you were they able to talk to you and give you any advice, or were they? I'm trying to understand what the mood was like, not just with you and your family, but around you.
Yeah, well, we tried to call. We knew other people staying close to where we were on the Big Island, and all of the lines were dead locally. We couldn't make calls. Internet was slowing down. So we really weren't able to communicate with other people other than in our immediate vicinity. And it was just our family and some friends that were with us. So we were, that was part of the problem, I think, was just not understanding if we were alone in this, in these alerts, other than, you know, what I was picking up on the internet.
Amanda, give us an idea of the conversations after you found out that this was a false alarm, because I'd imagine once everyone takes that first deep exhale, the question is, well, what if this had been real? Where were we supposed to have gone? What were the instructions? There was no guidance.
Right, and that's exactly the point. Is I was able to have a bit more understanding that it wasn't a legitimate threat sooner than I can imagine most other people did, because I was able to call in to a major news organization and you know, probably had a good 15 minutes of scare, but compared to others who didn't hear anything until that second alert went out 38 minutes after the first emergency alert came through the phones. All of our conversations were in the immediate following of what happened was, well, there wasn't really a procedure. There wasn't anything that we could have done. There's no set evacuation plans for the state of Hawaii. There aren't any, you know, shelters for people to go into as part of their set emergency plans for something like this. I spoke to locals afterwards, and they say, you know, they get threats for tsunamis or for hurricanes, and they do drills for those kind of things, but there's nothing set to kind of deal with any kind of threat like this if it were real.
So when you went to the airport, because we understand you're now back from Hawaii, but when you went to the airport, what were the conversations you were having and hearing?
I spoke with a few other people who were just tourists like myself, who seemed shaken and alarmed, but for the most part, all right. Surprisingly, a lot of the locals who I spoke to, or people who worked at the airport or who were around that area, were making light of it. And I think you definitely have to have a sense of humor about this, but it was definitely an interesting vibe everywhere.
My goodness. Well, we're glad you're okay, Amanda. That everybody is okay, certainly.
CNN producer Amanda Golden, thanks so much for spending some time with us early this morning, 4 a.m. out on the West Coast.
Thank you for having me.
Sure.
Thank you. So we did talk with CNN military analyst Lieutenant General Mark Hertling last hour about this. Listen to what he said about the protocol if a missile attack should really take place.
This particular event yesterday was horrible, and I'm sure very traumatic for anyone that lived on the island. But it was because it was a test that went awry, and it started from the wrong direction. Usually it is not the Emergency Management Association that starts the warning. They, in fact, receive information from military sources that understand that if a missile is coming in or not. So it would actually begin with the notification by Northern Command that they have sighted a missile being launched or heading toward Hawaii. They then process that toward Pacific Command, a military organization that's actually headquartered in Hawaii, and then they notify the Emergency Management Association that starts the process of notification. That's not the question you're asking. You're asking what happens when all of that does occur, and truthfully, not a whole lot, because there isn't a whole lot of shelters that would prevent a massive disaster and injury for the people that live on the island or anywhere else where a nuclear missile is headed.
The Hawaii Emergency Management Agency has now started testing the nuclear warning siren system. But if a missile is launched by North Korea, nearly 1.5 million people will have only about 20 minutes notice before that missile hits the island.
So just hours after the folks in Hawaii were scrambling to find shelter after this false alarm, President Trump did send out a tweet. This is what he said. So much fake news is being reported, they don't even try to get it right or correct it when they're wrong. They promote the fake book of a mentally deranged author who knowingly writes false information. The mainstream media is crazed that we won the election, unquote. So there was no mention of the false alarm and no statement for the people in Hawaii. And that is something people noticed. Brian Stelter, CNN senior media correspondent and host of Reliable Sources, with us now, as well as Daniel Littman, reporter and co-author of Playbook Politico. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Brian, I want to start with you. Do we know, as far as I'm aware, we do not know what exactly the president was told when he was briefed on this?
Yeah, because
and that
we don't
might
have
change how he reacts, yes?
Yeah, because we don't have the exact details of when the president first heard about this text message alert that went out to the population. And because we don't know when he was first briefed exactly, it's hard to say exactly how he should have or did react or would react in the future. What we know for sure is that one of the president's aides, who was on duty, a national security aide, did brief him at some point while he was at his golf club before he went back to Mar-a-Lago. That would suggest to me, based on the timeline here, perhaps he was informed shortly after Tulsi Gabbard and other local officials began to reassure the public this was not a true threat. So there was a 13, 14-minute window of time here before any local official gave the public any information at all. That is the most important window of time here to question the actions of local and federal officials. From that point on, there started to be reassurance that this was not a real threat. And then, of course, as you reported, it took 38 minutes for the official word to get out. We don't know exactly where in that time span President Trump was informed, but we can say this for sure. A reassuring tweet, a message from his Twitter account, or a statement from the White House with more details would have been helpful yesterday. And the fact that the president was tweeting instead about Michael Wolff's book, calling an author mentally deranged, it goes to show that the president is impulsive. He does not use his Twitter account necessarily to comfort the nation or to comfort an individual state at a time of concern. Instead, he uses his Twitter account to to pick fights, to get even, to punch back, etc.
So, Daniel, do we know if the president ever called Hawaii's governor?
Yeah, we haven't heard any evidence that he did. The Hawaiian governor is a Democrat, but usually in these situations, regardless of party affiliation, you talk to the president in this type of case. I expect, later this week when President Trump comes back to Washington, there will be a full investigation about the federal government's role in this. DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, hasn't conducted a full-scale exercise at the principal level, so cabinet secretaries, about how to respond in a situation where there's a domestic missile attack. And that's something that everyone will probably be pressing for after this weekend's incident.
And I think, Daniel, you said something that resonates with me, that is uncomfortable, but has been real for the past year. Hawaii is a Democratic state, and there have been instances in the past.
You think that played a role, Brian?
I don't know for sure, but we know in the past there have been these instances where there seems to be a lot more attention heaped on red states or states that went for Donald Trump, that supported him in the Electoral College. We've had these terrible mudslides out near Santa Barbara. Haven't heard from the president on that topic either. There was a delay in responding to the wildfires in California last year. So there have been these kind of questions. Does the president react differently, blue state versus red state? This is another one of those cases where it's going to feed people's concerns about that, I think.
So,
and just remember
Daniel,
that in the tax bill, all the talk was about how blue states, states that voted for Hillary Clinton, were hit much more disproportionately in terms of higher taxes than red states. And so that's a real concern that people will be looking at, because there are 50 states in the union. It doesn't really matter if it's a blue state or a red state. That's what it should happen.
So, Brian, if the president comes out, say today, and tweets about this, how do you take it?
I would say, it would be one of these better late than never situations. But I think we should emphasize this is primarily a state issue, not a federal issue. In terms of the mistakes that were made in Hawaii, state level, local level issues, not federal. Where the federal government does, of course, play a crucial role is in reacting if there was a real threat. First, detecting a threat, reacting. And I think one of the silver linings of this very scary situation yesterday is that it has people talking about the subject, wondering how it's supposed to work, wanting to find out how the actual protocol works to inform a state and then to inform a population about a threat. Hopefully, this is an opportunity to dust off those plans, to make sure everybody is fully prepared in case there is something real to react to, not just in terms of missile launches, by the way, but other local emergencies where there are push alerts to phones. I think the reality is when these technologies were invented to inform the public of a crisis, this was the pre-cell phone period. This was mostly for broadcast television and radio. Now we live in this world where everyone gets push alerts. It can be much scarier. It can also be much quicker to get get information. The fact that it took 38 minutes to send out a new alert telling the public not to worry in Hawaii, that to me is one of the real sins here. If everybody has a phone, it means they can be alerted right away when there's not a crisis. So there's a lot to learn from this, and I think it's good the Trump FCC is also going to be involved. That's the Federal Communications Commission, looking into how the push alerts did or did not work yesterday.
Yeah, no doubt about it that a mistake like this can turn into a very big lesson and could end up saving a lot of grief in the future if something does really happen. So they can use this as a positive in that regard. Brian Stelter, Daniel Lippman, good to see you both. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, the Trump administration is being forced to reboot part of the DACA program after an order from a federal judge. Next, can they come to a permanent deal to avoid a government shutdown this week?
Also, look, do you see anything unusual in that picture there? How about on the right side of your screen? The plane that skidded off the runway and landed just feet away from the sea.
Also, a 911 call captures the drama of an unfolding hostage crisis as an armed man holds a busload full of people at gunpoint.